Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for watching. Today's video is going to be covering the cooling system on my 1987 Mustang GT. So to start off with, let's talk about my current setup. I'm running just a standard 3-core aluminum radiator from LMR, which is their SVE series. I also have a dual electric fan setup out of Ford Escape and a 180 thermostat. The car actually cools down pretty good. The fans actually work very well. The car, whenever it gets up to temperature or it gets over 200 degrees, the fans kick on, usually cool it off within about 30 seconds to a minute. It's really nice. The problem is consistency. And whenever this car gets up after some spirited driving or even just some in-town cruising, the fans seem like they're kicked on all the time because it would kick up when it's at 200 degrees, drop it down to 185, and all of a sudden I'd hear the fans kick back on because the cooling system, again, it's just not really consistent. So what we're going to do today to fix that, or hopefully fix that, is we're going to swap out radiators. And as you can see, I have a little slew of components here on my workbench. So let's go ahead and talk about what I have here. So what I have on the bench is actually a dual pass aluminum radiator. Now this is just a universal Ford/Mopar radiator. It's very similar to size than compared to the actual stock radiator or my SVE radiator. But we're going to be changing directions a little bit, and the reason I'm going this route is because one of my buddies is running a very similar setup on his supercharged 351 Windsor Mustang, and he claims that it's been the most consistent cooling that his car has ever done. And his electric fan that he has on it, he just has a small single electric fan, and he says it rarely ever runs. And it's because his car just always runs so cool. I thought that was awesome, and I want to get the same results out of my car just because I want to put less stress on the cooling system and on the fans. So we're going to go ahead and try this out today. Now the big difference between the standard 3-core radiator and a dual pass radiator is essentially the dual pass is kind of what it is in the name. It's essentially two radiators in one. The inlet and outlet are essentially on the same side, and it forces the coolant to go from the upper portion of the radiator, the inlet, forces it to go through the entire section of the radiator to go back out to the outlet. Essentially, it keeps the coolant in the radiator longer so that it can actually utilize the entire cooling capacity of this radiator, and then outlets back to the engine. So essentially, it's supposed to be more efficient and actually cool much better. Now this radiator, again, is a universal one. I got this from eBay actually, and there's other manufacturers out there that make dual pass radiators for a Fox body, but they're a little bit more on the pricey side. So all the components I picked up here are actually more on the budget spectrum of things, just because I wanted to test out this theory first before I spent a ton of money. And I have a feeling that this is actually going to work out good, but we'll definitely put it to the test. But there's a couple key things that you guys need to look into if you're going to go to a dual pass radiator. For example, I already mentioned that the inlet and outlet are on the same side on a dual pass radiator, and you can see that here marked with those yellow caps. Now what that is that since the inlet and outlet are both on the same side, we actually need to change up our hose orientation for the upper radiator hose. I got some components here that are going to take care of that for us. And also, the fill point is actually moved from the driver's side over to the passenger side, along with the overflow connection point. So what we need to do is change the orientation of that, and also we need to run a longer hose for the radiator overflow. I have all the components here that's going to, again, take care of all that for us. Also, since it does not have bosses for the factory hold downs on your upper radiator, I went ahead and picked up just a hold down unit here that's just a universal one for a Mustang. And this one here, it's a polished aluminum, so it should look good, but if I don't like it, I can always paint it later. This is just a really cheap one. And it's going to use the actual fin here to hold down the radiator instead of the two bosses that are normally on a Fox body radiator. So, yep, that's how we're going to do the hold down. And also, I went ahead and picked up about 3 feet worth of the overflow hose. I'll take care of that. The lower radiator hose, since the outlet of this radiator is much larger than the factory Fox body one, went ahead and picked up this radiator hose here. I'll leave all the part numbers down below and where you can get them from. This one here has the correct size for the water pump and also the outlet of the radiator. Also, I went ahead and picked up a brand new upper radiator hose. Now, if you guys are still running a factory one, you don't need to buy another one. You can just use that one. I'm running a 94-95 radiator hose so I can avoid the turbo on my car. But I went ahead and picked one of these up because I'm going to use this instead. Also, to be able to make the connection from the upper radiator to the thermostat housing, I got one of these. Now, if you guys have seen Fox bodies, you know what this is. This is a Vortech radiator coolant crossover tube. This is usually what they give you when you install a supercharger kit of theirs. And you can still get all these parts from part stores, and they're still available online, so on and so forth. So I went ahead and picked up one of these. I went ahead and painted it black just for good measure to make it look good. and that's going to make our connection point between the upper radiator hose portion to the thermostat housing. Alright, so I'm super excited to get this started. Let's go ahead and drain my factory radiator, and what I'm also going to do is transfer, since my fans do work really well, I'm just going to transfer these fans over to this radiator, and then we'll put everything to the test. We'll do 2 tests. We'll do an idle test and of course a driving test. So without further ado, let's get started. And once it's fully drained, we'll go and pull the radiator out. But as you can see, I made my wiring harness extremely serviceable for the fans. So once we got the setup back in, we'll just plug right back in. Just a little break in the action here. Got the old radiator out. I'm just going to do some quick measurements comparing the old one to the new one. So got it out here with the fan off. We're looking at a total length of about 29¼ inches by 19 inches. So the height is exactly the same. Width, the new radiator is 31 inches. So it's about a 2-inch difference. And the width, about 2.5. So let's go ahead and get the new one up here. Let's measure that one. Okay, the new one's out here on the table. Yep, 31 inches by 19 inches by 3 inches. So it's a little bit deeper than the SVE one, and it's 2 inches wider. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and test fit this in here, get a plan of action for routing the hoses and everything, and then we'll start butting everything up. Alright, here's the radiator, and as you can see, it does fit inside the core support, just barely. This is about as big as you can go. There's still some real estate in there, not much though, but it does fit. It's actually sitting on the bumper stops at the bottom. This radiator is massive, absolutely massive, and as you can see, it does keep everything clear from all the regular spots of clearing, like the power steering and of course my intercooler piping. So now I need to plot a course of action for that lower radiator hose, and I'll show you guys what kind of modification I need to do to that hose. So I'll be back in a bit. Okay, just for frame of reference, what we're going to have to do to modify this lower radiator hose, we do not need this short bend here. So we're going to cut it right when it becomes straight, and then we're going to end up having to trim this just a little bit too. So I got some hose cutters. Go ahead and cut that off, and we'll start fitting this in, and I'll show you guys the final result of how much we had to cut off. So as you can see, fits on the water pump just fine, and gives us the appropriate angle we need to fit on the lower one. But as you can see, it's a little long, so we have to trim it up just a smidge, just enough so that way there's no kink in it. I'm going to end up replacing or putting in the old metal tube inside of it from my factory one. So alright, I'll trim this up just probably about 1 inch, and we should be good. All we had to remove from the lower portion, let's see how much. I cut a few times because I didn't want to, make it too short, but this should be plenty long enough. Approximately 1.5 inches. Yep, just that much. 1.5 inches, and it's the lower hose is ready. So I'm gonna go ahead and reattach my fan assembly so it's all one unit, and then we'll start bolting everything down and be ready to go, and then we'll move on to the upper radiator hose, and I'll show you guys how to orientate that hose to make everything clear. As you guys can see, I got the fan shroud back on it, and of course the surface area being almost identical with the SVE radiator fits just no problem, and the only difference now is that this inlet is located there, and of course I didn't have to trim anything because there was plenty of room, and also again guys, remember it's wider than the SVE one. So it's ready to go back in the car, and then we'll start plumbing up the hoses and everything, reconnect our wiring harnesses, and we'll get to that upper radiator hose. Alright, so here it is with the fan installed. I still have, the room is much tighter, but I still have plenty of room between the fans and of course the pulleys and the intercooler pipe and everything like that. And I got my lower radiator hose on, so we can get a shot of that here. Secure to the water pump and the radiator. Angle's still off a little bit, but the hose clamp's pretty tight, so it shouldn't leak. We'll check it out once it's got some coolant in it. So now it's time to connect the thermostat housing over to the inlet of the radiator. And then after that, I'll probably secure my wiring harness. Like I said, it's already plugged back in for the testing phase. I don't really need to string it up just yet. I'm going to wait for that. So let's go ahead and get this radiator hose attached, and I'll show you guys how I'm going to modify the factory one with the Vortech unit. Just to start off with, we're going to go ahead and cut this at the straight here because we're not going to need this bend, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this real quick. We'll trim it here in just a moment. Alright guys, after it's all said and done, it should look something like this. I ended up having to reuse part of my 94-95 hose because the outside diameter was a little bit bigger than the factory one and I couldn't squeeze it over it. So what I did was I took the original hose, cut a piece of that to put over the Vortech piece here, and then I put this in from the 94-95 on the radiator and slipped this over the hose and that, and then tightened it down. So looks pretty good. Doesn't look too much like a hack job. Again guys, this isn't a direct bolt-on situation here. So as you can see, it clears power steering pump and it touches the line here, but only the rubber does. So we're okay. And since I already have a cowl hood, shouldn't have any issues with clearance on the hood closing. Okay, so we're getting closer. Go ahead and, as you can see, I already routed my overflow hose, kind of just running it over the top, and it'll kind of just sit there for now. Once I get the radiator hold down on, I'll go ahead and fill the coolant and we'll go ahead and test everything, make sure we got any leaks. Just to my surprise, the factory hold downs actually will work if you remove the rubber feet at the bottom of the radiator support. So I did that so I could get proper clearance for the top of the radiator, and I just put down some foam tape so it's not metal on metal contact, and in doing so dropped the radiator enough for my hold downs to work, and it's on there, it's not going anywhere. I still may use that polished piece at some point, but I'd have to hollow out the bolts because again it's for a Fox body and this area right here is too far away and I didn't want to bend it, so I just went out on a whim and tried this, and sure enough it worked. So just a note. That's going to wrap up this installation. I went ahead and let the car get up to full operating temperature, let it idle, let it heat soak. Also went out and did some driving and some spirited driving as well. And just right off the bat, a couple things to note. Normal driving characteristics and idle characteristics, there was pretty much no change between radiator and radiator. The temperature would still get right up there, the fans would have to kick on to cool it down, and normal driving, about the same thing, holding about the same temperature as before. The biggest thing to note here is that under spirited driving, the temperature wildly dropped on this thing, so much so that I thought that my temperature sensor was actually broken, because it dropped so much that I was so surprised, and I'm like, oh great, now I can't monitor temperature anymore because the sensor's broken. Well, to my surprise, it actually did just drop it that much. I was going about 195 degrees, decided to punch it, and I saw it drop down to 173. And I've never seen this car run that cool during a pull or after a pull. It's never run that cool before. That's why my immediate thought was, hey, this thing must be broken. Well, then I let it sit, let it heat soak, and then sure enough, the temperature would come right back up. So this radiator here, I could definitely see why someone that's especially like into road racing or drag racing, to where whenever your engine's under load, it gets really cool. This radiator definitely did that for me. So that's what made it worth it to do this whole setup. Now, of course, normal driving characteristics for street cars and stuff like that, again, I didn't notice any difference temperature-wise between this dual pass versus my old SVE 3-core. So I would just say, keep that in mind. If you plan on doing a lot of spirited driving, that's where this setup would really probably make a difference for you. I was really happy with that, and then not only that, I was able to do a lot of different pulls back to back pretty much, and just to see if it was maybe a fluke or something, or maybe it was a heat pocket that got up to the sensor and it couldn't read properly. And sure enough, the car, if it got up to about 195, maybe 200 degrees, as soon as I'd punch it, it'd drop about 20 degrees. 15 to 20 degrees on average is what I saw through the multiple pulls that I did. So I was very, very happy with that. And if you guys are looking into a possible cooling solution where your car gets too hot when you do some spirited driving, definitely look into doing a dual pass radiator setup. I'm happy with it just because that alone, even though the other characteristics didn't improve really at all, but just that alone, the spirited driving, having this thing cool off to the coolest it's ever seen, I'm so super stoked about that. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this video. I'll be sure to notate anything if there's any changes along the way, just to see how this system holds up. I'll be sure to relay that back to you guys, but that's pretty much going to do it for now. So guys, if you like my content, please like, please share, and subscribe. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.